make sense to, say that you should only start from here or start from there. Should you start with like the basics before the mystical? I get that question all the time, by the way. I get the question all the time of people saying, Rabbi, because that's how sometimes people call me, Rabbi. I wonder why. Is it okay if I take a Kabbalah class, even though I may not be, an expert in the rest of the Torah? That's the question that I get asked all the time, and I'll reserve my answer until we work through it in this class, but you'll see tonight how we explore this very question. The question is about, one second, Shai, that door has to remain closed. Thank you. So the question is about, how do we rank, listen, welcome to Corona, this is how we roll. So the question is, how do we rank Torah? How do we rank mitzvot? How do we rank Judaism? Not against anything else, but even within itself. That is the topic for tonight's discussion. So, what we're going to do is start with a story. And I think it's a pretty heavy story. Okay, but let me give you the context. This is going back to the late 1700s. So there's a movement in the 1700s known as the Haskalah movement. A movement begins in Germany, and it's called the Haskalah movement. Has anybody heard of the phrase Haskalah? Haskalah. Fran has, Susan has, Steve has. Okay, David has. Mike and Sarah, I see you guys glowing, so, the picture, so I'm thinking that was a yes also. Here's the deal. Haskalah means philosophy or enlightenment. The movement was called the Enlightenment movement. Okay, I'll tell you what it was about. It was about cutting out the spirituality from Judaism and replacing it completely with a philosophy, with an intellectual dimension, but to take out the spirituality from Judaism. So this was a movement started by Jews in Germany, and the goal was to modernize Judaism, so-called modernized Judaism, to take it out from ancient beliefs and practices and make it about philosophy, make it about intellectualism, etc. That was the goal, and the approach. Every movement starts somewhere. It starts with a few people, and then it grows a little bit. So part of the growth model, or part of the strategy of growth, was a bit of an insidious strategy, very secretive, and one might argue not so nice. There was a fellow who was one of the maskilim, one of these Haskalah folks. And his name was Shimon. Let me look up the story here. His name was Shimon of Zamot. Shimon of Zamot. I'm going to put it in the chat so you can read it and see how it's spelled. Okay? Shimon of Zamot. Boom. It's in the chat. So, that was his name. And he posed as a regular, traditional, observant school teacher. That was his cover story. But really, secretly, his goal was to infiltrate the traditional circles and plant seeds of Haskalah, of secularism within his teachings, and thereby move people into a secular, assimilated path. Are you with me so far in the background? Yes? Good. So, the movement begins in Germany and it spreads to Lithuania, Hungary, Poland, and then it starts moving into Russia and the Ukraine, which were the hotbeds of Hasidic life and Chabad Hasidic life. So this Shimon of Zamot decides he's going to go for the big fish. This was the times of the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad. Just to give you some biographical details, the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, you can guess his name was Shneir Zalman. And by the way, that's where the name Schneerson comes from. Schneerson as a last name. Schneerson means the son of Shneir. The Alter Rebbe's name was Shneir Zalman. His descendants, his son was first known as Shnei Uri, but then it took on the surname Schneerson. Just the more you know. So, the Alter Rebbe was born in 1745 and passed away in 1812. This was late 1700s. Shimon of Zamut decides he's going to Liadi to meet the Alter Rebbe. And there he wants to pull a ruse and get the Alter Rebbe's stamp of approval that he is a legitimate teacher, even though he wasn't. Remember, no one knew his cover. No one knew his true story, who he really was. It was all a show. But this was his goal. Now, before I continue the story, I need to tell you what happens next. Sorry, I need to tell you, not what happens next. I need to tell you a piece of, I need to remind you of a biblical story. We all know it, but I just want to set it up because it's going to come up in the story. The story is about Isaac, the second Jewish patriarch, Abraham, Isaac. Isaac has twins, Esau and Jacob. Esau is the older twin, Jacob is the younger twin. They're always jostling for, position. At the end of his life, Isaac calls his older son, his firstborn son, Esau, for a blessing. He said, bring me food, I'll give you a blessing. The wife, right, his wife Rebecca, says to the younger son, to Jacob, quickly, go get the food. Come, take the blessings. He does. And after he leaves with the blessing, Esau comes with the food. And Isaac was blind. Remember, Isaac couldn't see. That's how the whole thing happens, right? And Isaac says, Gewalt, what just happened? He has a bit of a very uneasy moment. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And let's look at this moment together, and then we're going to get back to the story. Don't worry, we're going to get back to the story in just a moment, but stick with me here. Okay, here we go. I'm opening up the Torah Studies text. All right, too many preambles here. 1a. Here we go. Genesis 27:33. Adina Malka. If you're up to it, please read. Oh, we can't hear you. You got to unmute.
And Isaac shuddered, a great shudder. And he said, who then is the one who hunted game and brought it to me? And I ate of everything while you had not yet come. And I blessed him. He too shall be blessed.
So Isaac panics. He shudders. He's out. You're Esau. You're Esau. So who was the other guy that just gave me food and I blessed him? Right? That's the story, right? Okay. Take a look at what Rashi says. Rashi's explaining this word. Rashi's explaining this word right here. Shuddered. What does it mean that he shuddered? Why shuddered? What was going on? What was the emotional experience? Rashi, please continue. Adina Malka, please continue. One more reading.
And Isaac shuddered. Explained it as the Targum renders it.
You can skip the Hebrew.
Which means he was perplexed. The Midrashic explanation is that he saw Gehinnom opening beneath him.
So Rashi cites two interpretations. Remember, Rashi is the standard biblical commentary. Rashi says there are two understandings of this word. Give me 1 second here. Hold on. So there are two. Okay. Rashi says there are two understandings. Number one, simple explanation means he was perplexed. So not so much shuddered. Look, we have an English translation, so it picked one of these two. But Rashi's first meaning of the word vayecharan is perplexed, tamiha, which means, what just happened? Who was the other guy? Right? So one understanding is he's just confused. He's perplexed. The Midrashic explanation is much more than perplexed. He was shaken to the core. Why? Because he saw Gehinnom opening beneath him. He saw hell, purgatory, opening up beneath him. So that's why he shuddered. So one, he was just confused, and one that he shuddered. Why? Because Gehinnom, purgatory, opened up beneath him. Now, that's the information that you need so we can continue the story. The story is text number 2. The story happens with the Alter Rebbe. The story was written by the previous Rebbe, the 6th Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, who passed away in 1950. He writes the story of what happened with his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, with this fellow Shimon of Zamot. Remember Shimon, who was the guy pretending to be a Torah true teacher, who really had the agenda to move people away from Torah and mitzvot and into a secular approach? Remember that guy? Here we go. This is a story in the words of Shimon himself. Shimon himself, the dude, the faker guy, right? Shimon tells this story. On Wednesday, he visited Liadi. He visited the Alter Rebbe in Liadi. On Wednesday, my turn arrived to be received by the Rebbe for an audience in the, quote, upper Gan Eden. That means the room. It's called the upper Gan Eden. Chassidim call it the upper Gan Eden. It's like the Rebbe's room, the Rebbe's office. When I entered the Rebbe's chamber, I was struck with fear and awe by his appearance of his face, his powerful and penetrating glance, and his mighty and deliberate voice inquiring, "What can I do for you?" But I immediately recovered and calmed myself. Remember, he was on a mission to infiltrate Chabad, to infiltrate the Alter Rebbe, to fool him. So he gets thrown off his game, but he recovered. He says, I recovered and I got back into character. I said, I am an elementary student teacher in my hometown, and I teach my pupils according to the rules of Hebrew grammar, dikduk. But my fellow teachers oppose me and slander me for it, saying with sarcasm, why don't you teach the pupils, the students, the science of linguistics as well? In other words, this fellow, instead of focusing on, I'm just going to explain the story, instead of focusing on the spiritual messages of the Torah, he's busy giving them Hebrew grammar lessons, which is a very sharp turn away from the traditional way that children are taught Torah as part of the religious studies. He's now focusing on it as kind of like a language study, and then so they didn't realize what his agenda was. His agenda was to move people away from the spiritual stuff. That was his opening. He got called out for it by the other teachers, so now he's complaining to the Alter Rebbe. Understand the level of deception here. Has bad intentions. He gets called out on some level back home. He's coming to the Alter Rebbe to try to get sympathy from him, to then go back to those other guys and say, well, look, the Chabad rabbi is on board, so lay off. So he's complaining that the other teachers are giving him a hard time. Look what he says. It gets even worse. This is still him speaking to the Rebbe. When I offered as evidence that a knowledge of grammar is important, when I offered the Rebbe's new text of the Siddur, so many things I need to explain. The Alter Rebbe poured through dozens and dozens of prayer books, a prayer book liturgy, Siddurim, to come up with a refined nusach, a text of the Siddur that is perfectly correct with the best of Hebrew grammar. And that's the Chabad Siddur that we use today in Chabad synagogues around the world. That's the Alter Rebbe's nusach, the Alter Rebbe's text, which is not obviously a departure from the others, but it's a refined version that's better in grammar. So this guy, what a chutzpah. This guy is saying, I tell the other teachers when they get on me about grammar that look, even the Alter Rebbe, even the rabbi of Chabad, he's also into grammar. Because look, he just published a new text of the Siddur, which follows exactly the rules of grammar. When I said that, they had nothing to reply. In other words, I was right. For the public benefit, so this is what he says, for the public benefit, I request that you give me a letter of reference. You see the chutzpah? Letter of reference, which I can use to demonstrate that it is good to teach young children according to the rules of grammar, to accustom them to read correctly and to teach them Tanakh, which is scripture. Again, don't fall for it. We know the truth. This guy was a maskil. He was one of the maskilim. He was from the Haskalah movement. His goal was to move people away from religion. That was his intention. His first approach was move people into grammar and away from the spirit of the text and into like the mechanics of it, and then move people off, move the kids off totally. But look at this chutzpah. Not only does he not shut down when he gets called out, he goes now to try to get a letter of approval from the Alter Rebbe. So listen to this. The Rebbe leaned on his forearms for about 5 minutes. Then he raised his head, opened his eyes, and said, "You are correct. The hymns and psalms and the prayers, and especially Kriyat Shema, the Shema prayer, must be recited with great care, following the rules of grammar. But as for teaching grammar and linguistics as academic subjects, one must be very cautious about doing such a thing." By the way, he's talking about young children, right? And about that being the entirety of Jewish studies. So keep it in context. This is not, you can never study Hebrew. That's not what he's saying, but in the context of the story. The Alter Rebbe continues, in the heavenly yeshiva, there are separate halls for each kind of study. And right between the hall of grammar study and the hall of linguistic study stands the hall of those who deliberately misinterpret Scripture. He's onto him. Now, when one's soul ascends to heaven each night to renew its life spirit, when we go to sleep, the soul elevates. The soul rises to the study hall that corresponds to the subject he studied during the day. How cool is this, by the way? But occasionally one may enter the wrong hall by mistake. Instead of entering the hall of grammar, the hall of linguistics, he may enter the hall of those who deliberately misinterpret Scripture. He's being generous. He's being nice to the guy. He sees right through him. He's being nice to him. He's saying that you might end up, because you're getting too close to this, you might end up mistakenly into the wrong hall. Therefore, one must be very cautious about studying the subjects of grammar and linguistics. Again, he knows this guy's agenda. He's a Rebbe. He sees right through him, and he's calling him out in a nice way. When he finished speaking, he again leaned on his forearms as before. Then he raised his head, opened his eyes, and asked me how I explained to my pupils the verse, and Isaac shuddered a great shudder. That's the verse we had before. When Esau comes to Isaac with the food, he says, "Oh no, what just happened?" And he shudders. So he says, "How do you explain that?" So this teacher said, "I explain it according to the first interpretation of Rashi, that it means he was astounded. He was perplexed. He was confused." So look what the Alter Rebbe says back to him. "And why don't you explain it to your pupils according to the second interpretation of Rashi, quoting the Midrash, that he saw Gehinnom opened up beneath him? Why don't you give them that interpretation? Why just the simple, he was confused. What just happened? I just gave the blessing. Who are you? Why don't you say that he saw hell open up beneath him, and that's why he was concerned? That's why he shuddered?" So look what the teacher says. Shimon, "In my opinion," I replied, "one shouldn't fill the pupils' delicate minds with agada." Agada means non-literal interpretation. It means like midrashic discussion. I don't think that you should put these types of ideas in the students' minds, the children's minds, and especially with things that might frighten them, such as Gehinnom, purgatory, and the like. Even less should one teach small children things that they can't even imagine. The pupil will wonder how the large and wide opening of Gehinnom could enter into Isaac's small room, and how could its fires, which have been constantly blazing for 555 years, I guess that was the year, enter the room. How could these fires enter the room, and yet Esau and his father Isaac remained alive and were not burnt to a crisp? If it opened, how come they didn't fall in? So what's going on? And the whole thing doesn't make sense. So the Alter Rebbe says, "I have a question for you. How does the Midrash even know that he saw Gehinnom opened up beneath him? Where did they get it from? How do you know that's what he saw?" I remained silent, making no reply. Obviously, I had no answer. Indeed, is this the first gross exaggeration found in the Midrash and Talmud? Cynically, he thought, yeah, well, what do you want me to say? Yeah, of course, they made it up. Because that's his perspective. When he saw that I remained silent, the Rebbe said, "When Esau entered Isaac's room, Isaac asked him, 'Who are you?' To this, Esau replied, 'I am Esau, your firstborn son.' But this was a lie, for he had already sold the birthright to Jacob in a legal sale with all the required formalities." If you're familiar with the biblical text, Esau had sold the firstborn rights, i.e. the rights of the blessing, to Jacob. It was a binding sale. So when Esau came in and said, I'm your firstborn son, I deserve the blessings, guess what? He might have been biologically the firstborn, but he did not have the rights to the blessing. He had sold it. So it was a lie. Not Isaac was lying. Esau was lying. Not Jacob was lying. Esau was lying. Now Isaac knew this, and thus was very frightened by this lie designed to annul something that is valid under Torah law. This caused him to tremble, for telling such a lie resulted in Gehinnom's opening up beneath him. In other words, when Esau lied, when Esau was trying to bald-faced lie and take something that wasn't his, that was opening him up to purgatory, Esau. And that frightened his father, Isaac. That's what he tells this teacher. When the Rebbe finished speaking, he leaned on his forearms as he had done before. Then he raised his head and opened his eyes. It is customary that whenever he receives people, even during the daytime, there are 2 lit candles, a Chumash and a Zohar, book of Kabbalah, on the table. He now lifted one of the 2 candles and scrutinized me, after which he said, "You come here from Vilna, but you claim to come from Zamut. You convert little children to the idolatry of Haskalah, but you claim that you are a school teacher. Because of these lies, Gehinnom opens up beneath you." Drawing a parallel between the misrepresentation of the misrepresentation of Esau as the firstborn to the misrepresentation of this teacher as being, above board and with no agenda. Because of these lies, Gehinnom opens up beneath you. How many souls have you already destroyed? Yet you continue to rebel. Yes, it's true, you are a heretic, and anyone who goes down that road will never return. I quickly fled his chamber. That's the story. You with me on this story? It's a heavy story. It's a heavy story. It's about deception on multiple levels. This fellow Shimon of Zamut was deceptive. He had an agenda to move children, Jewish children, away from Jewish spirituality, to move them into a secular space. That was his agenda. To create more assimilation. The goal of the Haskalah movement was to become normalized amongst Germany. Well, we know how that ended, right? A little over a century later, or so, century and a half later. But the point here is, this fellow was not above board. He was trying to pull the wool over the Alter Rebbe's eyes, and the Alter Rebbe cites the story of the same thing happening, not with Jacob, the way we typically understand the story, but with Esau. And he says the pit of Gehinnom is opening up beneath you, and essentially he called him out. Now, this raises a very important question. The story is the story, and it's a powerful story, and it is what it is. But it raises a very important question, and that is, where should we start teaching children? In other words, okay, he had an agenda, and that wasn't nice, and it wasn't kosher, and it wasn't ethical what he was doing. Certainly not to the children, and certainly not to the Alter Rebbe in this meeting. But that aside, is there any merit to his argument that you teach young children a simple meaning and not the midrashic meaning? If a child is learning this story and you get to the word Vayecharad, why not translate it as he was confused? He didn't know what just happened because he had just given the blessing. Who are you now? Why move to that place where you're telling children about the pit of Gehinnom opening up, which can raise all sorts of questions about what does that mean? What does it look like? Why? Right? Why go into that kind of, I'm going to use a term that's not literal, but why move into a mystical space and not stick with the simple explanation? Understand my question? My question is, maybe Shimon, the school teacher, was actually right. Not in his agenda, but in his specific example. In this specific example, why not? Why not teach kids the simple approach? Why go deep? This will take us into our discussion today. As I started at the top, the very top, if you can remember, half an hour ago, I mentioned that the topic tonight is about how do we rank mitzvot, and also where do we start learning. When it comes to Torah study, do we jump into Kabbalah? Do we jump into the spiritual stuff, or do we start with the basics? Now you see how this story might be connected with that question. But before we answer the question, we need to look at this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion is called Eikev. And Eikev means because. Why? Because that's what it means. No, literally it means because. The Torah portion opens up with Moses speaking to the people. And he tells them that it will be because you follow God's law that God will bless you. So, basically, if you do what God wants, God will do what you want. It's going to be a beautiful relationship. But the word that we're going to focus on is Eikev. Because you keep your end of the bargain, God will keep his end of the bargain. So let me share my screen with you. Here we go. This is text 3a. I'm going to read. And it will be, this is the opening verse of our Torah portion. Because, we highlight that word. Because, Eikev, that's the name of the portion. Because you will heed these ordinances and keep them and perform them, that the Lord your God will keep for you the covenant and the kindness that he swore to your forefathers. So you keep Torah and mitzvot, God will keep his promise. A match made in heaven. What a deal. What a bargain. Unbelievable. Because text 3b, Rashi gives a different angle. Rashi says the word ekev, ekev means heel. Like the bottom part of your foot, heel, H-E-E-L. Not heed, heel. Heed is also there, tishma'un. But heel. And it will be because you will heed. Take a look at Rashi. The Hebrew word ekev literally means heel. The verse speaks of heeding those minor commandments that one usually tramples with his heels, i.e. that a person treats as being of minor importance. What Rashi says is something very interesting. He says, when Moses tells the people, you got to keep your end of the bargain, and then God will keep his and bless you. Moses wasn't just talking about generally keeping Torah and mitzvot. Moses was honing in specifically on the heel observances. What are the heel observances? The stuff that you might otherwise overlook as being insignificant. The stuff that's like, yeah, it's not so important. You see, typically, we human beings, we rank things as being, this gets into our discussion, right? This is our theme. We rank mitzvot. Oh, that's an important one. Shofar and Rosh Hashanah, you got to come to that. Kol Nidre. Oh, Kol Nidre, yeah. I mean, that's like a huge service. Matzah on Passover. Yeah, you got to get your matzah ready. Chanukah menorah. We think of certain mitzvot as being very essential, very important. And then we think of other ones as being small and minor. So what Moses is saying is, Eikev. Keep even the ones that are otherwise discarded, like, what did I just jump? Oh, what did I just step on? Oh, I didn't see it there. Right? The stuff, the everyday stuff that you might not pay attention to, keep those. And if you keep those, then God will bless you. That's how Rashi reimagines the verse based on that key word Eikev. Because Eikev means because, but it's a bit of an awkward term. It's really not a very common term in Torah, and therefore it's being imagined in a deeper way, that it means the heel. Keep the heel mitzvot. So,
Rabbi,
yes, Ray, go ahead.
it's off the track what you're doing, but wasn't Yaakov holding on to the heel of his brother?
Yes, excellent connection. Speaking of Yaakov and Esav, Jacob and Esau, Yaakov gets his name because Yaakov is Yud Eikev. That's how you spell Yaakov in Hebrew. The letter Yud and then the same word Eikev or Akev. Yaakov means the one who was holding on to the heel when the twins were born. Esau came out first, and Jacob was right behind, holding on to his heel, trying to schlep him back in and getting out first. Pretty sure it doesn't work like that exactly, but that's he was holding on to his heel. Now, let's get back to this narrative, because I have a very important question to ask. And please unmute yourself and jump in on this. Okay, here's my question. So, based on Rashi's understanding of Eikev, heel. So how should you treat the heel mitzvot? How should you treat the ones that are, that seem like a heel? How should you treat them? Jump in.
As important as any other one.
Yeah, just as important. In other words, don't make a difference. Don't make a distinction. Oh, this is important, that's not important. Don't start ranking. No rankings. Right? Leave the rankings for college football if that's going to happen. Leave the rankings for, tennis. Leave the rankings for universities. Leave the rankings for medical schools. Don't get into rankings with mitzvot. Even the heel ones you got to do. That's the message. But there's a contradiction. There's a contradiction. You see, at the very same time that we're talking about this egalitarian approach, this everyone is equal, right? There's democratizing mitzvot. All are equal, the same. Yeah, at the very same time, we're still calling this a heel mitzvah. We're still calling it a heel. Why are you calling it a heel if it's not a heel? So I know what you're thinking. You're trying to say what people think of as a heel is not really a heel. So it's from your perception, you might think it's a heel. So I'm telling you it's not a heel. But there's still something fishy here. Because even as you're talking about democratizing, when I say democratizing, I mean equalizing, all mitzvot are all the same, they're all equally valuable, you're still, in a sense, ranking. There's still ones that are clearly on top, clearly on bottom, but still do them anyway, pay attention to them. But you're still calling it a heel. I want to draw a parallel with another teaching from our sages in a very similar vein. Take a look-see. Take a look. Yeah. Let me share this again. And let's do 5a. Okay? David. If you don't mind, jump in. David Lazan, jump in. Please text 5a from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers.
And be careful with a light commandment as with a grave one, for you know not the reward for the fulfillment of the commandments.
Similarly, our sages say, be as dedicated, as careful with a small mitzvah like a big mitzvah, because who knows the reward? So the message is an equalizing message, right? We should equalize all mitzvot. So why does it call it one big and one small? Why does it talk about light commandments and grave commandments? Minor and major. What's going on here? Couldn't our sages have said? Let me rephrase it. You may be wondering, well, how do you do that? How do you say that? Let me raise my hand and take a crack at this. You ready? The rabbis say, all mitzvot are equally valuable. Therefore, do them all with the same dedication. Wonderful! You've just really equalized everything. No. Says in Pirkei Avot, says in Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 2, Mishnah 1, be careful with a light mitzvah like a heavy mitzvah. Be careful with a minor mitzvah like a major mitzvah. Why minor and why major? Why are you still giving the terms? It's a contradiction. At the very same time that we're talking about equalizing, we're still talking about minor and major and heels. Ribono shel olam, God Almighty, why are we still focused on ranking when we're trying to unrank? If you're trying to unrank, then just equalize. Why are you still using the language of big and small? What's going on here? So, Maimonides, hold on. Does my question make sense? Is my question coming across clear? Yes? If you're trying to equalize, then just say they're all equal. Don't use, at the very same time that you're trying to talk about equality, you're still using language that this one is bigger and this one is smaller. Why are you still talking about that in that way? Okay. To understand this, we're going to keep on going and keep on learning. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to learn Rambam, Maimonides. And look what he says. This is a long reading. I'm going to read it. Look what Maimonides says. The explanation is as follows. The Torah contains positive commandments and negative commandments. With regard to negative commandments, Scripture enumerated the punishment of each one, save for a few of them. Some incur the death penalty, some of them incur excision and death at the hand of heaven, while others result in lashes. From all of these punishments, we can infer which prohibitions are severe in punishment and which of them are not as severe. With regard to the positive commandments, however, Scripture does not specify the reward. The reason for this, and here this is really the key line. This is what it's about. The reason for this is so that we do not know which commandment requires more adherence than the other. Rather, God instructed us to do various commandments without telling us the reward for any of them. Accordingly, we are to treat them all with equal scrupulousness. Now, let me explain what he's saying. What Rambam is saying is simply this. You and I may have in our heads an understanding or a belief of which mitzvot are the big ones and which are the small ones. Whatever metric, whatever ranking system you use, we're all human. We all have a way to rank what we think is important, what we think is less important. Like in life, what are our priorities? Everyone's got a different system, a different formula. Knock yourself out. What Rambam says, what the Mishnah is telling us, is very important. And that is that you can rank from today to tomorrow, but you don't know. No one knows the effect of a mitzvah. You might think that a mitzvah is big or small, but you don't know when you do the mitzvah what that triggers above. Right? You could have a big button, you could have a small button. Right? And you could say, well, I think this is a big button, I think it's a small button. But you don't know what happens when you press the button on the other side, because you and I can't see on the other side. The other side would mean in the spiritual realms. So you and I can't see the effect of the mitzvah. No human being sees all of the chain reaction that happens when we do a mitzvah. So Maimonides says, therefore we have two systems. Yes, there is big and small. In our conception, you and I can judge and say, I think this is important, I think this is more important, I think it's less important, I think it's big, I think it's heavy, I think it's light. All sorts of calculations. Comes along our rabbis and say, it doesn't matter. It's a minor mitzvah, it's an easy mitzvah, who cares? How do you know what it does? The effect of it. That is unknown. No one can say, I know the effect of it. You know the experience of it. I want to clarify this. You and I can relate to the experience of doing a mitzvah. And you might say, that experience to me, Ray, you're unmuted. I'm going to mute you just so that we don't have the noise. So you and I might say that the experience feels bigger or smaller. That's our experience. But what about the effect on high? What about how it affects God? You know that? You've seen it? You've asked God? God told you? You have some analytics back there? Go ahead. Demonstrate proof. How do you know? Right? How do you know? So the answer is you don't. I don't mean you, I mean me also, right? We don't know. That's what Rambam is saying. Why does the Mishnah say there is big and small, but still don't measure, or don't rank? Which one is it? Are there big and small, or are there no rankings? Is it equality or distinction? Two systems. Our experience, the effect of the mitzvah. Our experience, we can rank. I like this one, I like that one, this one's harder, this one's easier. Our experience is subjective. But what it does, only God knows. Therefore, this might seem like such an easy mitzvah. This might seem like such a basic thing. This might seem like such a boring, I didn't say this, like a boring mitzvah. Maybe we don't like it. How do you know that button, when you press that button, even though you're not interested, when you press that little button, how do you know what maybe that causes the greatest effect? Which is why Maimonides says, that's why we have a law in Judaism that says that when you encounter a mitzvah, when you're doing a mitzvah, when you're busy doing a mitzvah, you don't stop for another mitzvah that comes your way in the middle. Ha'isek b'mitzvah, pater min ha-mitzvah. One who is involved in a mitzvah is exempt from another mitzvah. Why? Because if you're doing this mitzvah, who's to say that this isn't causing the greatest effect that needs to be caused right now? But if it's left to us, we may be jumping around all day. You ever see somebody with a remote control in their hand and the TV on? Yeah? Do we sometimes, maybe we're watching something and we hit, well, what else is on? 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 You with me on this? Yeah? We keep on changing the channel. We get restless. Imagine if you could keep on jumping around the mitzvah. That would be crazy. So, halacha says, Jewish law says, if you're dealing with a mitzvah, finish it. Why? Right, FOMO, right? Because maybe that's the bigger one. Who knows who's the bigger one? But here's what we do know. If you're doing it, finish it. Assume that this is the big one. Assume that this button creates the big effect. Assume that. And that's why Maimonides says also, I'm just paraphrasing, we have text in the book, but I'm just telling it to you outside. That's also why we have another Jewish teaching that says when a mitzvah comes your way, grab it. Don't allow the moment to pass. You know why? Yeah, but it seems like a small minor mitzvah. I can catch it again. No. You don't know. For you, your experience might be, you know your experience. So for you, it might not rank so high, and that's fine. But you don't know when you do it, what happens then, what happens next. Therefore, don't pass it up, because who knows if that isn't just a button that needs to be pressed right now to unleash the light that the world needs in a positive sense. You with me so far on this? So Maimonides explains this almost inherent tension between, are we ranking or not ranking? And the answer is, well, both. We're ranking our experience, but we can't rank the effect of the mitzvah, because that's behind the curtain. We don't know what's on the other side when we do a mitzvah. When we press the button, we don't know what that causes. So that's what the Mishnah is saying. Be careful with a light commandment as with a grave one. In other words, be as careful with this one as that one, even though for you it might seem light. It doesn't matter, because you don't know the reward. Not the reward. You don't know what the effect of that is going to be. Okay. Now, this explains something else that's pretty cool. And for this, we're going to introduce another interesting theme, which is the mitzvah of sending away the mother bird. The Torah says that if you want to take the eggs of a bird, or the chicks of a bird, then you have to send away the mother bird first. Now, I'm not going to get into the ethics of taking any animal or whatever. That's not outside of tonight's discussion. The Torah has compassion on the mother to say, at least send away the mother before you take the baby, before you take the young, so she doesn't see her youth being taken away. That's what it says. So for compassion, that's what we do. Now you might say, well, compassion, don't take it in the first place. Again, I'm not going to address that. It's a good question. Maybe it's for our Jewish course of why, to ask, why are we allowed to take this, that, or the other? So maybe somebody ask it, and I'll have to look up an answer. But here's what I know. It's about compassion for the mother. And the Torah says that if you do that, the reward is long life, longevity. You're going to live a long life. Which prompts the Talmud to say something remarkable. Wow, for such an easy mitzvah, you get such a big reward? Long life? Just for shooing away the mother bird? Just like, how hard is it to chase a bird away? Boo! And it flies away. And then you take the young, and because of that small act of compassion, right? That gets long life. That earns a person long life. Wow! Can you imagine a mitzvah that requires a little bit more effort? That's what the Talmud says. To show it to you, let's study it inside, because it's good to hear me, I'm sure, but it's even better to see it inside. Talmud Trate Chulin. Here we go. If with regard to the sending away of the mother bird, which is a mitzvah whose performance is simple, as it entails a loss of no more than an isser, the value of the mother bird, you're not losing anything. You're just chasing with the mother bird. If in that case the Torah says that you will live long, I'm just paraphrasing, that you're going to live long life, certainly, says the Talmud, certainly the reward for fulfilling a demanding mitzvah is even greater. Imagine, if such an easy mitzvah gets such a big reward, imagine a mitzvah that requires a little bit more effort, a little bit more, takes a little bit more out of you. How much more so is the reward? The problem with this is that we just established that we don't know the reward of a mitzvah, because that's God's deal. So how do we know that if this reward is great, how much more so other mitzvot are also great? No, maybe the small button unleashes a great reward. Understand my question in the Talmud? The Talmud says, if when you send away the mother bird, if that easy mitzvah gets you a big reward, how much more so other mitzvot? No. Talmud, hello Talmud, who says? Maybe that small button unleashes, in God's eyes, a big reward. How do you know that applies to another mitzvah? That's using your subjective perspective of a mitzvah and applying it to the effect that it has above. So, who says? So, the question is on the Talmud. This is not my question. It's not your question. It's none other than the question of the Maharal of Prague. And to show it to you, once again, sharing my screen, take a look at text 8a. Look what the famous Maharal of Prague, the creator of the Golem, writes. He asks on the Talmud, What is the logical progression here? After all, we do not know the reward of mitzvot. The effect of the, like I said before, we don't know the effect of the mitzvah. So how can we make an argument that pits lighter mitzvot against more severe ones? Say, well, if for sending away the mother bird you get such a big reward, how much more so for a mitzvah that requires more effort? Who said? God determines what the effect of a mitzvah is. Pressing that button for that mitzvah does something great. Who says the same thing as for another mitzvah? Which this prompts the Maharal to give a completely different understanding that we've had than up until now. And I'm going to stop sharing. It's a very long text, and we don't have time to read it inside and then to unpack every line of it because we're going to get lost in the text. I'm going to give it to you outside. You have the text on your own. You can read it at any time. It's text 8b. Here's the core of what the Maharal Prague is saying in his answer. And this is going to get us to where we need to be in understanding the entire picture of tonight's class. Everything will come together. Give me 5 minutes. Maharal says that when it comes to a mitzvah, we have two elements. There is your effort, and once again, there is the outcome of your effort. So when it comes to your effort, you know your effort. You know that one mitzvah required a lot of effort, and we know, and you know that another mitzvah did not require the effort. You know that one mitzvah was like, boo, and you did the mitzvah. And another mitzvah required preparation, and money, and planning, and showing up, and investment in various ways. You know that another mitzvah took a lot of effort. I don't have to tell you, you know certain mitzvot are easy to do, and certain ones are hard to do. So what the Talmud is saying is like this. We don't know God's understanding of the mitzvah. Of course not. That's outside of our sandbox. But here's what we know. We know our investment. If for investing in the mitzvah of sending away the bird, it's a slight investment. You just scare the bird and it's done. If for that mitzvah you get a profound reward for the effort, how much more so do you get a reward for the effort of another mitzvah that was more strenuous? That's it. That's what the Talmud says. For the mitzvah of, it's not about the outcome of the mitzvah, it's about the effort of the mitzvah. So when you put in a little effort and you get a big reward, fantastic. Imagine if you put in more effort in the mitzvah, how much more reward you would get. That's all the Talmud is saying. But ultimately, the Maharal concludes, the effect of a mitzvah, who can tell? Just like Maimonides, just like Rambam said, the effect of a mitzvah on high, with God, with our souls, in the spiritual sense, who can tell? Who can see the reward of a mitzvah? But here's what we know, that a mitzvah ultimately binds us, brings God into the world, and binds our souls to God, which takes us to the final idea, and this is the big idea. It says in the teachings of Hasidic philosophy, Chabad Hasidic philosophy especially, that what is the definition of a mitzvah? What does the word mitzvah mean? Typically we think of it as commandment, obligation, a good deed maybe, loosely translated. No. Mitzvah means connection. Mitzvah is related to the Aramaic word tzavta, which means to plug in, to connect. So what is a mitzvah? A mitzvah is an opportunity simply to connect. It's not about it being a good deed. It's not about, it's simply, it is a good deed, but a mitzvah is a connection point. What does that mean? God is infinite and we're finite. So what connection is there between infinite and finite? Spoiler alert, there's not much of a connection, right? If you have two finite things, so they're in the same playing field. But infinite and finite, what's the commonality there? They're two totally different. So how do we become connected with God? Very simple. When God asks us to do something, we don't even know why, because does God need anything? Doesn't matter. God asks us to do something, and we do it, we're connected. By virtue of the fact that He asked, and we did. That's the simple calculus, right? You don't need a long formula on the chalkboard to write this out. It's very simple. God asked us, we delivered, so there's a connection, right? God asked, we did, now we have a connection. In that area, we're connected. Otherwise, what connection do we have with God? God is the creator, we're the creation. So what infinite and finite. There's no we don't speak the same language. It's like, when you draw those circles, you draw two circles and they're not touching, and then you have that third area that touches both sides. That's where the mitzvah comes in. Right? God is infinite, we're finite. However you want to depict it in your mind, the circles aren't touching. But when you have a mitzvah, that's what God wants, and that's what we did. Now they're touching. Now the 2 points are touching. Fine. So here's my question. With which mitzvah do you connect with God? With an easy mitzvah? With a hard mitzvah? Which one do you connect with God? On this level of formula, God asked and you did it. Which one? What's the answer, David?
All of them.
All of them equally. Because it doesn't matter what God asked. Doesn't matter which one you did. The formula is so basic. It's so essential. The formula is a core formula. God asked and you delivered. That's it. So whether God asks for shofar on Rosh Hashanah, matzah on Passover, I don't know, whatever we consider Kol Nidra, Yom Kippur fasting, or sending away a mother bird, or respecting your elders, I don't know, whatever is easy for you, right? It doesn't matter the effort, doesn't matter how you rank it in your head. Who cares? It's not about how we understand it. Simple formula. God asked, we did it. Great. That's the connection. That's the ultimate. Only if you first say hi. Then you can have food. Say hi. Now you can go on and eat. Yes, you can have food. Okay, so again, what is the power of it ultimately, according to Chesed Kfal? What's the power of a mitzvah? It's about the fact that this gives us a way to connect with God. God's infinite, we're finite. What's the connection? God asked, and we did it. Mazel tov, we're connected. Doesn't matter what. That's why every mitzvah, that's the equalizer. Doesn't matter big or small. So big or small is us in our heads. It's us saying, well, I think this is more meaningful. For me, it's more meaningful. I feel it more. I feel it less. It's easier. It's harder for me. It took more out of my kishkas. It didn't. All wonderful things. That's us in our heads. That's all us in our heads. That's us, and what's it really about? God asked, and we delivered. That's it. Like there's a rabbi in the Talmud who said, if God asked us to chop wood, we would be wood choppers. That's it. We would all be wood choppers. Because it's not about, I think that the reason is because, or knock yourself out. It's also fine. You can philosophize from today, that's also fine. But at the core, it's because God asked, God wants, and we deliver. That's it. So what does that mean for us? That means that ultimately all the ranking systems out the window. Not just because, like what Maimonides and the Maharal say, not just because we don't know the effect of a mitzvah. We don't know the effect. We do know the effect. Connects us with God equally. They're all equal. It's not like, maybe the small button creates a bigger effect than the big button. Maybe it's inverse. That's still too philosophical. It's so simple. God asked, and we did. We're connected. Equally, all mitzvot. This is the Hasidic way of understanding our Torah portion Eikev and the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. Eikev means keep the heel commandments. Why? Even the ones that you might have missed. Keep it. You know why? Because God asked, and when you do it, you're connected. And the Mishnah says, don't rank the easy ones, the hard ones. They're all equal. Yeah, perfect. They're all equal because they all connect you equally to God. Back to the school teacher. Karen's keeping me on track here. Back to the school teacher. So when it comes to a mitzvah, somebody says, Rabbi, which mitzvah should I start with? What's a good mitzvah to start with? What's my answer now? Based on today's class, what's going to be my answer? Doesn't matter. The next one. Just do it. Just do it. Which part of Torah should I study? Rabbi, I'm interested in the Kabbalah class, but I'm not familiar with the Bible. Should I jump into a Kabbalah class, or should I first become very proficient in Scripture first? What's my answer? Jump in. Don't like go all methodical on this. Go jump in. The Alter Rebbe said to the teacher. Hold on, before I get back to the story. Does what I just say make sense? Yes. Don't rank Torah. Don't rank mitzvot. Don't rank Torah. Just jump in wherever you're in. You're in. Back to the teacher. The Alter Rebbe said to the teacher, when you encounter the verse about Isaac, Vayecherad, how do you explain it? Vayecherad. He says, that he was confused. Why not that he saw the pit open up? Because they're not ready for it. Yeah, they're not ready for it. You can't jump in. You can't jump into the deep end so fast. Alter Rebbe says, that's it. You're in your head. You're in your head. You're getting too logical here. You're getting too logical. You're getting like, first this, then that. That's not how it works with God's Torah. God's Torah, it's all equally available. And in fact, when you mix the deep stuff and the basic stuff, or the straightforward stuff, you give a child, even a child, an appreciation that this is a bigger experience than them. This is something that is bigger than what they can figure out. It's about God taught it. It's God's Torah. So we're studying it. Whatever it is, whether we understand it, whether we don't understand it, we're studying it. I do a mitzvah. Why? Because God said to do it. I study Torah. Why? Because it's God's Torah. Of course I'm studying it. Once you start editing out, this I'm going to do, that I'm not going to do, this I'm going to study, that I'm going to teach, the other thing we're going to leave out. All right, now it's your Torah. Now it's not about God's Torah. Now it's about your philosophy. And for the maskilim of the Haskalah movement, that's right up their alley. But in the Alter Rebbe, you don't play that game. Not in his room. That approach is not going to fly. That's the story of the Alter Rebbe. So the Alter Rebbe. So now you might say, well, so what does it mean practically? It means practically our kids in school. You have a first grader. You're starting to learn Chumash from Bereshis or Vayikra, wherever you start learning with a child the Torah. So what, you're going to start throwing in all of Kabbalah? Okay, first of all, Rashi is not throwing in Kabbalah. He's throwing in a midrashic statement about Gehinnom, about whatever. The point is, it was a point to move him away from this super calculated, I've got it figured out, I know what needs to come first, and therefore I know what's not going to come next type approach. Now, Rebbe said, don't play that game. It's God's Torah equally. It's God's mitzvot equally. You know, there's a technique in what we call clickbait. Have you heard that expression, clickbait? It means when you write a headline that's very much tantalizing. Like, you'll never believe what happened when, and you're like, well, what happened? Click. That's how they get you to click, and you know, every time you click on the website, more money, advertisers, whatever. It's called clickbait. There's certain websites that, even news websites, that are very good at the headlines, that are very good at getting you to click. But oftentimes you'll see, especially at the bottom of articles, it's like, you know, top 10 this, or, you know, the most important 5 things that you need to know about that, etc. You'll have like lists of numbers. We're tempted to, all of us, whether we're aware of it or not aware of it, subconsciously, consciously, we're all tempted to do the same with Judaism. These are my go-to things. These are my, you know, a good solid 20, 30 things that I do. The other stuff, maybe not so much. But this is my list. So what's the takeaway from tonight? Don't be so stuck on your list. Don't be so stuck on the list. I'm not saying to let those go. I'm saying add to the list. Don't be like, well, I do these, I don't do those. No. Don't be so fast to cut out some stuff. Remember, the list is based on you. But a mitzvah is really about God. God said, and we're going to do. That's it. Simple formula. So, here's the takeaway message. You ready? Very simple. Take your list and add to it, one at a time. Take one mitzvah that is a heel mitzvah, a mitzvah that you only notice like, I didn't see that. That? I don't know. I've never done it before. Take one of those. And if you need a suggestion, I'm happy to give ideas, right? Or maybe you have an idea. Find one mitzvah. Start with one. One at a time. Start with one that's not on your immediate, on your list of things that you're always thinking about Jewishly, and add it once. twice. It's habit forming. And that becomes now on your list. And then take another one and add it to your list. Why? Because every time we do a mitzvah, it's another connection. And who doesn't want to be plugged in? What, you want to be unplugged? No one wants to be unplugged. You want to be plugged into the source, right? First of all, it sounds cool. Plug into the source? How do you go wrong with that? So that's that. And when it comes to Torah, do the same thing. Find a place in Torah. I mean an area of Torah study, a subject. Let me say it clearly, a subject in Torah that maybe is a little off your radar. So maybe Talmud, maybe Tanakh, maybe Nevi'im, the books of the prophets. Like what happens after the 5 books of Moses? What happens with Joshua? Okay, a few years ago we had the Bible course. Rabbi Schussman was teaching the Bible course, going through the books of the prophets after the 5 books close, because there's a whole set of stories that happen after. But you know what? Go online, Google it, Chabad.org or another find a Jewish version of the translation or whatever it is, and study it. Art Scroll has wonderful books. Jewish publisher Art Scroll, wonderful books with commentaries, easy to read, complicated to read. You can choose which one you want and study. The bottom line is, let's expand our repertoire. That's my point. Let's expand our mitzvah repertoire, and let's expand our Torah study repertoire to become a little bit more experienced and sophisticated. Not sophisticated, more experience, because each one is a point of connection. So again, just to clarify the story, the Alter Rebbe obviously saw through this guy right away, and he basically told him that by picking and choosing what you're doing with the school kids, it's indicative of a very rational approach, which almost fundamentally takes it away from a divine element. When you make it completely rational, you're missing the spiritual. You make it a philosophy, and you move it away from the soul. You got to keep the soul in Judaism, right? Hence my name, Sollish. Just all right. Let me look at the chat. So that's the message. Make sense? Yes. Find a mitzvah, find another area of Torah study, and do it. By the way, with regards to Torah study, I have we have some big plans for this year. Whether we're on Zoom or in person or both, I have a lot of exciting plans with new teachers, new areas of Torah study. So, and this is exactly my intention. This is driving me in what we do here at Intown Jewish Academy, is to keep on expanding the repertoire, keep on expanding the types of study and the types of teachers and the types of programming to have more opportunities, not just in quantity, but also in quality and also in different areas of Torah study. Thank you for joining me tonight. I see that there are some questions in the chat. I will get to them right now, but I know some of you have to go. Have a wonderful evening. Take a look at our new website, intownjewishacademy.org. It sounds the same, but it looks really different, and I hope you enjoy it. Sandrine, thank you for the very, very nice text. What's wild is I posted the jewelry, Kabbalah and gemstones, or gemstones and Kabbalah. We're having a online jewelry workshop. You get a kit with 108 gemstones, and we're going to make it, and it has a Kabbalistic angle to it. It's going to be an incredible evening. It's coming up at the end of this month, August 31st. But I posted it, and within like 3 or 4 minutes, I see Sandrine is joining. I'm like, how is that even possible? And the answer is, well, it's all about timing. And then Sandrine sent me a nice text about the website, how easy it was to navigate. So, take Sandrine's lead. Anyway, join us online. It has all the upcoming many of the upcoming programs, and it also has
easy now. So easy.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I've been working on this for a while, and I'm very happy about this. And of course, you can access audio and video on the website. It should be one place where you can go and spend a little bit and learn and enjoy. Okay, let me go to the chat. Let's see what we have here. Shimon of Zamut, I wrote that. FOMO, David wrote that. Oh, so what about the story of the school teacher? Oh, children are so much more open to the illogical. Yes, exactly. It's only the teachers that are like, well, how are we going to explain it? The children are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you ever hear children speak about their imagination? It's not a problem. By the way, I'm not saying that it's fairy tales. I'm just saying I agree with you, Karen, that we don't need to be afraid of what the children are going to think. That's like a coded way of saying we're uncomfortable with it. Blame it on the children. It's really us. It's projection at that point. But I agree with you. Good. What else is going on? Questions, comments? Fran and Dror, how's Vegas?
Good. I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
What about rabbinic mitzvahs versus mitzvahs from the Torah, biblical?
Excellent question. So here's the short answer. There are 7 primary rabbinic commandments, rabbinic mitzvot, on top of the 613. Now you might wonder what's going on with those things and what's the deal. The Torah says that you should listen to the sages, which means that essentially what God is saying is that I am rubber stamping that mitzvah, not any proclamation that any rabbi wants to give. It has a very, very strict protocol. I said there's only 7 of them, right? 7 rabbinic commandments, so it's very, very limited in scope. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, it has that weight, or the other point that I mentioned, it has the weight of Torah law based on the fact that Torah says to follow those commandments. That's why Maimonides says when you are, what example does he give? I forget. Maybe Hanukkah menorah, lighting the menorah. So obviously the Hanukkah, I don't know if he gives this example or another one, but I'll just use it. When you're lighting the Chanukiah on the Festival of Lights, so you say, Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you, God, King of the universe. Blessed are you, Lord, our God, King of the universe, who has given us, sanctified us with the commandments, and given us the commandment to light the Hanukkah menorah. Not true. Since when did God tell us to light the Hanukkah menorah? God never said that. Look through the 5 books of Moses. There's no mention of Hanukkah. How do I know this? Because it happened 1,000+ years later. So what do we say? We literally say God's name. Blessed are you, God. We say Ado. We say God's name, King of the universe, who gave us commandments and gave us the commandment to light Hanukkah menorah. Lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah never happened. So Maimonides explains what we're saying is, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gave us the commandments, including the commandment to listen to the sages. And the sages said to light the Hanukkah menorah. Therefore, when we do that, we're listening de facto, if that's the right phrase. We're then following what God said. God said to listen to the sages. When we do this mitzvah, we're listening to the sages and fulfilling the mitzvah. So that's how we explain the rabbinic mitzvot. Very specific circumstances. It has to be accepted by everyone. It has to be certain circumstances, criteria for it. There are other safeguards that the rabbis put on, but that's not like a positive mitzvah. There's 7 things that the rabbi said, go ahead and do this, and that would be also forging a connection. I think your question was, what happens with this conversation tonight? Yes, that would also forge a connection, because God said, listen to the rabbis in these certain circumstances. When we do so, God said, and we delivered. The same calculus, the same formula as before. God said, we did. God said, listen to the sages said this, we did it. Boom, we're connected. So it would be the same equivalent. It's very important, though, when it comes to rabbinic law, that we know the distinction, because we should know what's biblical law. I mean, that's the majority, right? And 7 mitzvot that are rabbinic. Any other, just in order to have clarity, just so we know, not because we're ranking better or worse, greater or lesser, but it's good to know. Other questions, comments? Hey, Sarah, good to see you. Welcome. Hey, where's Mike? Was he here?
All right.
Oh, hey, Mike. How's it going?
On the side.
I'm moving so that maybe I can see you, but I know that that's not gonna do anything. But anyway, there we go. Hey guys, how's everything? It's good?
Yeah, very good.
Baruch Hashem. All right, everyone's good? Yes? Baruch Hashem. Listen, everyone stay healthy, stay positive, and what else are you going to say? Stay healthy and stay positive. That's it. We got to stay healthy and stay positive. Good. What else can I mention? Hey, Fred. Good to see you as well. Okay, let me just mention everybody. Ray, it's good to see you. Lisa, it's great to see you. Sandrine, Mike and Sarah, Fran and Dror, and Nate, good to see you. David, Fred and Donna, David and Yona, Karen, Adina Malka, Steve, and of course, Joy, Dr. Maxey, always great to see you. Bye, everyone.
A comment.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Fred.
One comment. Today's the 15th of Av.
Yes.
A very joyous day, and amongst all the things that we have to be thankful for, we had a great Torah studies class, so we can add that to the 15th of Av.
Thank you. I'm very thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you for saying that. But I should have mentioned that before. Thank you for mentioning it. Today is or was the 15th day of Av, which according to the Talmud was one of the happiest days of the year in ancient Jewish life. Even today, we don't recite Tachanun. It's like a mini holiday. It's a day in multiple things happen on this day. Lots of shidduchim, lots of matches. How would you translate that? Matches, not like
Matches.
like relationships.
Matches.
Matches, relationships were created on this day. It says the singles of Jerusalem would go out and meet each other on this day. Whatever, it was like the Jewish Valentine's Day, but I don't want to reduce it to like some weird I'm not saying it's weird. I'm just saying like I don't want to give any secularized or Americanized picture to it, but it's it's a really special day. So thank you for mentioning that, and thank you for your kind words about the class. I say this from time to time, but I mean to say this every time. I truly value the time that we all have to spend together, to see you all. I treasure each moment that I can see you and you can see me, and that we have to study together. And I know for me, it keeps me going, Torah, and I hope for you it's the same way, that we have this oxygen, this uplifting experience that we can all share. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for your kind words, and of course for being here and studying together. All right, I'll let you guys go because I know it's getting late. So have a good night. Laila Tov. We'll see you soon. Take care. Be very well. Take care. Stay healthy.